Zookeepers of Reddit, what's the weirdest thing you've seen an animal do? I was a zookeeper and worked in animal care in various capacities for a long time. One of the weirdest things I've seen is when a reptile drops their tail. It's only happened to me once with a lemon gecko. I was transferring from one terrarium to another. I had a poor grip on him, and as he was wiggling loose I desperately grabbed onto his tail, which he promptly dropped, and I was left holding a dismembered, writhing tail while the gecko escaped. Also, two of the lions at one of my jobs were afraid of a raccoon. I could hear them, the lions, making the most pitiful, pathetic bellowing sounds. I went to check on them, and lo and behold, a raccoon was up one of the trees in their enclosure. These two large alpha predators were absolutely distraught over a little raccoon. For its part, the raccoon was completely unbothered and just observed them for a bit before going on its way. Not as a keeper, but a few years ago we were visiting the Berlin Zoo, and some kids that were in our group were really fascinated by the chimpanzees. After a few minutes of making faces and trying to get the chimp's attention, one of the kids shows the monkey his middle finger. The chimp responded with lifting both its arms and showing the kid two middle fingers. Checkmate, kid. I'm a zookeeper. I work in a small department with lots of random animals that we take on programs to show guests. In our department, the cages are made of mesh, so the animals can sometimes be housed next to each other where they can reach each other and interact. One time, the beaver was housed next to the tamanders, lesser anteaters, and we went over and saw the tamanders licking the beaver all over. By the time the beaver went back to his own enclosure, he was soaking wet with tamander spit. I'm a zookeeper. We had a lone, male marabou stork that found a water bottle, picked it up, and put it in his nest, then proceeded to incubate it for a while. He got mad when we eventually had to take it away from him. I've seen a dog giraffe attempt to nurse from lactating females and seem peeved when she wouldn't let them. I've seen an owl get a whole square of sod skewered upside down on his horns that eventually slid down and completely covered one of his eyes. He acted like nothing was happening. Ex-zookeeper here. I remember once there was a period of a few days where one of the chimps had this stick and was spending hours at a time just rubbing it on the ground. Some of the keepers tried to give it other toys to play with etc, but it wasn't interested. Anyway, long story short, it was sharpening the stick and then tried to stab a keeper through the bars of their indoor part of their enclosure. I worked at a private zoo for a while, and the weirdest was probably the female baboon rescue we had. She was very well tempered, but she would beckon new workers over to her cage with a gesture, and if you had anything in your hand, she'd reach out and rip it from you, then throw it off the steep hill behind her enclosure. I would bring the chimps treats each week. I once brought a bag full of lychee, which they thought was only meh, but the keepers loved them. Surprised me, since I thought they would go nuts for them, so I picked a whole tree's worth. One day I bring a dozen kiwi, and it was clear they had never seen them before. Watching them peel the kiwi so delicately with their lips was amazing. Also, given watermelon, they will eat it all the way through to the skin. I'm talking all the rind down to 1 millimeter of tough green skin. They'll chomp a banana tree stalk like candy. Anyway, chimps love treats. Been as a keeper for almost 2 years now. We have a giraffe that has a couple meds he has to take daily, but the little sh will not take the same food from you 2 days in a row. He knows exactly what we are up to, and also happens to be the pickiest eater ever, so sometimes it takes an hour to get 5 pills, the size of a typical Advil pill, into this 2,000-pound animal. Also was watching lions in their inside enclosure once. Mom and dad were laying down, and daughter was just walking around trying to find a spot. The daughter is notorious for bugging any other lion with her to play by sitting on them. She walks over to mom and starts to sit, or so I thought, and just starts pissing on her. I've never seen a lion double take, but that second I swear to God I saw mom look at what was falling on her and then just disgust on her face, and she jumped up and swatted at daughter. It was pretty freaking hilarious. Volunteer, former, not keeper. I like to show up early before my shift to watch the big cats get let out into their space. One morning, one of the lionesses was already out, and she was sitting there like the famous New York Library lions, only with a Calvin face. Her tongue was hanging out, and her eyes were squinched up. I asked the lead cat keeper what the deal was, Oh, she ate a skunk yesterday, so we decided it'd be a good idea to let her stay outside overnight instead of stinking up the night house. They opened the doors to the lion's night house, and her brother and sister came bounding up to her in what appeared to be great concern. "Where were you last night?" Her sister took one whiff and bounded to another place in the exhibit. Her brother started to sit close to her, thought better of it, walked about 6 feet away, and then settled down and watched her. Neither my son nor his friend are zookeepers, but at the Denver Zoo gorilla exhibit his impulsive friend pulled down his pants and started beating his chest like a gorilla. The large silverback flew into a rage and charged the big viewing window and smacked into it so hard it bulged way in and scared them all to hell. They didn't understand how the window didn't break and realized they would have been instantly pulverized if it had. Score 1 for the gorilla. Not as a keeper, but I saw a gorilla one time take a bunch of hay or grass in one hand, in the other, and combine them together. He then ate it like a hot dog. I used to work at a zoo that kept a parrot's cage near the guest bathroom. My coworker with Ibs would run by the parrot en route to the bathroom every morning, screaming, "I got a sh." Guess what phrase the parrot learned? He's now no longer a featured animal at children's birthday parties. Not as a keeper but primatologist. During my masters I did a study on spontaneous to loose and captive baboons. The weird bit? They were flossing. Literally flossing with hair and broom bristles, like we do with toothpicks, and, well, gentle floss. You can Google flossing baboons, and you'll pretty quickly get a photo of Georgia. My first proper job, between high school and college, was at a zoo, South Lakes Wild Animal Park, in England. My favorite animal to work with was the babirusa. We only had one, and he used to escort me around the perimeter of his enclosure whenever I was in the area. If I stopped, he'd stop. If I walked backward, he would turn around and follow. He would crazily wag his tail and make what I assumed to be happy snorts. He seemed to genuinely enjoy seeing me, and when I didn't have much of anything to do, I'd make my way over to his pen just to rub his back. He was like an old, happy doggo. Generally, the weirdest stuff you'll see at a zoo is what the people are doing. I once saw one gorilla poke another in the, but then sniff his finger. One gorilla was laying in a hammock and the other was sitting on the ground beneath him. He would reach up, poke the gorilla's butt, look at his finger, sniff it, then repeat. Super late, but actual zookeeper. I was once charged by a very large male sulcata tortoise who apparently thought I got a little too close to his female. Fortunately, I was able to step over the foot-high fence in time so that I was viciously mauled. Our tortoises are characters. I've also had to flip the male over by myself, who, mind you, is on the upper end of his lifespan and about as big as they get, because he got a little too frisky with the female and fell off. I'm no zookeeper, but in a safari park I saw a giraffe and a rhino get in a fight. The giraffe won. I was a volunteer. If a zoo guest counts as an animal, we caught a guy trying to push the stall door open for our bull giraffe. All of the lady giraffes were in the adjoining stall because he looked lonely. The guy was unable to and was gently told not to do that, please. I have a personal theory that if it is possible for a zoo guest to get into, onto, or behind an enclosure, they will. If you want to keep them out, you must make the enclosures people-proof. Most guests are fine. It's a few like the giraffe liberator that are the pain. Not as a keeper, but I was chaperoning a Cub Scout pack to the zoo. We went by the lemurs exhibit, a huge area with rocks, waterfalls, and tree houses for them. Right in the treehouse in front of a big crowd of people, and the scouts, 2 of the lemurs were having X and another lemur was getting off watching them. I quickly tried to get the scouts onto the next exhibit. Not as a keeper, but last trip to the zoo was chatting with a gorilla caretaker who had just tossed some fruits and vegetables into the exhibit. Another zookeeper walked past, and the silverback picked up a piece of hardened scat and flung it about 75 feet and hit her in the shoulder. From what we were told, he just didn't like that zookeeper for no particular reason. He just enjoyed hitting her with objects. As a former baseball coach, I would have put the speed of that pop at 60 miles per hour or so. It left a nasty welt on her. My river otter has learned how to open the door to her habitat. A guest got a video of her pushing a fake rock over to the door, climb up on top of it, and start jiggling the door handle with her paws. Otter see, otter do. We make extra sure That door is locked now. Ha ha ha.